I suddenly came to the realization that a lot of modern day video game developers really hate women, which is kind of a strange thing to say when you see half of the developing teams for a lot of these AAA companies are made of women. And you can see this at Ubisoft, Microsoft, Sony. All these big AAA companies hire a rather exorbitant amount of women to be in the staff for these games that are being developed currently. But now more than ever, there's a vitriol and hate for the female form in the video gaming industry. I think this all stems to the people that are being hired to produce content for video games nowadays, because what we're seeing for all the pretty designs and styles that were there 10, 15 years ago that kind of laid the foundation for video games and their current day modern iterations, all we see is hate for those games. And of course, I'm looking at Stellar Blade and the First Descendant being the prime examples of that, and you're seeing the opposite for games that are besmirching and uglifying the characters that are women or feminine. And I think that's the thing that we're seeing with Dragon Age the Veilguard, where it's getting heaps of praise for making women not women in the game anymore, stripping them of all their feminine aspects. And I think this is the weird thing we're seeing in the video gaming industry, where female characteristics are looked down upon and shamed. And I think that's what we see with Dragon Age the Veilguard, where the character creator is heavily skewed towards masculinized traits when it comes to the physical curves and features of the female characters. I think this is the complaints people were having about Dragon Age Veilguard, where you can't make feminine proportions in the game because that is restricted and seen as offensive. And I think we see this all throughout the video gaming industry when it comes to female proportions and body image, where a pretty face is now seen as something offensive, and anything that is shaped with curves and feminine sensibilities is seen as a certain disrespect towards women as a whole. I think that's the reflection that we're seeing with the game developers that have taken control of the industry, where there's this latent sense of hate and undesire for anything that skews towards feminine characteristics. And this bears itself in what we've been seeing in a lot of female characters that have come out recently in the video gaming industry, where there's this hideous uglification process when it comes to the development of these characters. And I think a lot of players notice this, and they have pointed it out in multiple games that have come out in the recent past. And we see the glaring difference when we see those traits actually appear in games coming from foreign companies in the East. And I think Stellar Blade is the best example of that, because people praise it because we haven't seen a beautiful woman in gaming in over 7 to 8 years. So a lot of game players revered this game because it was doing something we expected from gaming, bringing in a sense of respect for feminine characteristics that everyone admires, along with women, not just men, and even those in the LGBTQ represented area that love and respect feminine characteristics. But this is all but absent in the video gaming industry, where things related to female proportions or faces in general are ritually masculinized to fit this new current day modern trend of removing and disrespecting female characteristics. And I think that is reflected in a lot of the video games that are coming out today, and it makes me think, who are developing these games and why do they hate women? And I think we can just look at Dragon Age the Veilguard and the people that are developing that game. Of course, if you don't know BioWare is an EA company that used to produce quality games. They produced the Mass Effect game, they produced the Dragon Age game, and now they're producing the new Dragon Age game, Veilguard, that is coming out with praise from the mainstream media gaming reviewing outlets that are saying this is how femininity looks. And you can just look, this is supposed to be a female character, and I'm looking at it and it doesn't represent what most people believe femininity looks like, but this is the new standard being set in the modern day development game within the Western sphere. And I think this is the thing that I'm complaining about, where there's this seething hate for women in the gaming industry. And then people would say, no, that's the past, when video gamers were misogynistic and they were making beautiful women that look unreal and that had proportions that weren't realistic. Those were the days where people hated women. And I'm like, really? Making very beautiful women, making women all powerful and interesting and charming in video games? I'm talking about Tomb Raider and a lot of these other characters. That's the age of people hating women? I think that's the opposite. That's people actually loving female female characteristics and accentuating those characteristics to make them at their most appealing level of quality. And I think that's the thing people got from gaming in the past, and that is stripped away with a lot of the games that have come out recently, where it's about downgrading and stripping away all the sense of femininity from the female characters, making them essentially men with moderately bigger chest sizes and bigger butt sizes. That's the distinction that we're getting in the video game industry. Even that is being stripped away if you look at Dragon Age the Veilguard. And I think this is the sensibility people are seeing throughout the video gaming industry, where there's an active disdain for women in the gaming industry, where it's about making them ugly, unappealing, unattractive, and removing anything that gets men or women to look at women. And I think that's the crazy thing. People think only men are looking at women. Women are looking at women, and women are avoiding these games too, because you're bringing in these ugly traits that are pushing away the fan base. And I think it goes all down to the people that are producing the content for these games. You can just look at Dragon Age Veilguard. The developer themselves have their own perspective on what they think women should look like, and women in their mind should look more like men for some particular reason. And I think you can look back into their overall talking points when it relates to the game itself, where their own perspective on games are heavily focused on LGBTQI sensibilities, and that is fine and good and all, but if the sensibilities are aimed towards removing feminine characteristics from female characters, that is kind of a step too far. And you can see this philosophy develop all throughout the video gaming industries. And I usually bring this point up, but you can just see what happened with Naughty Dog in the development of The Last of Us 2, where they were more skewing their presentation of female characters by stripping away feminine characteristics and replacing them with masculine characteristics to be more trans friendly to the LGBTQ audiences they were trying to build up. And you can see that in the article, where they were interviewing some people that were developing the game, where they were more focused on making a lot of the female characters, particularly Abby, more masculine, because they felt that was more friendly to the audience, and they will relate and see representation in a more masculinized woman than a more feminine woman. And I think that's the thing we're seeing happening with Dragon Age Veilguard. The lead developer and game director for Dragon Age Veilguard is a transgender person themselves, and they have that perspective where we need to make this more friendly to people that are not as feminine. And in order to do that, we have to exclude the 99% of women that are feminine and want that representation. And I think that is the gross miscalculation that we're seeing in the entire industry itself, where people are trying to adjust to the 1% while ignoring the 99% of the audience that is looking for those feminine characteristics and traits. And I think that is the reflection of having a bad developer and game director, where their focus is bringing in things that have no concern for the game itself. Dragon Age is a dark fantasy game. Why are people having top surgery to become transgender in a dark fantasy game where you can use magic to change your body and face and voice? What's the sensibility in actually introducing that into the game? And I think that's my concern here, where we're seeing these instances where people are injecting things into the games that have nothing to do with the game that they're producing. And it just makes you think, okay, this is more about politics rather than making a good game. And I think that's the essential thing that we're seeing happening in the video gaming industry, where they're stripping away all these female characteristics because it's more in line with their progressive ideology of introducing more LGBTQIA friendly characteristics into the world to influence the gamers that are playing games. And that is the main focus, I think, to influence the game players that are playing games by replacing what we see as traditional femininity with masculinity. And I think that is the surprise thing we've been seeing all throughout the gaming industry. And I think we see this consistently with a lot of the new releases coming out. You saw this with Horizon Forbidden West, we see this with Star Wars Outlaws, and we continually see this with other titles. So it's a seemingly endless chore that is happening within the industry to cater to this minority group that feel like that they have to see themselves in everything, even in femininity. And by seeing themselves in femininity, they have to remove those feminine characteristics to feel more represented. And I think we all see that in Dragon Age with the character creator, where it's essentially non-binary focused, where you're producing characters that are male or non-binary and have maybe slight feminine characteristics but could be perceived as male. And I think we see this with a lot of the character creators that are being developed now within the AAA industry, where they're just more focused on perpetuating the ideology of the game directors and not really making something that is in line with the customer base and their sensibilities and their perceptions of what femininity is. So that's why female characteristics are absent in the industry nowadays. But that's just my perspective. I miss some of the great female heroines we saw in the past, and it irked me when I saw this Dragon Age Veilguard reveal, where I was like, okay, we're doing the same thing even more so now, where we're just leaning into this lack of femininity in gaming. Of course, you can play these Korean games, these Japanese games that still have some remnants of female characteristics. I wouldn't just say remnants. It has the full package of female characteristics that people love, and that's why people are more drawn to these games that are coming out. But you tell me what you think about the situation. Do you think these new style modern day developers hate female characters and just females in general? I think that is my leaning, but you leave your comments, tell me what you think. Like, comment, share, subscribe. This is Wagner Knows Why. Catch you next time.